Something happening anyway. Oh. Díomh Accorda, fáilte isteach in Machishtin in Yalav. Welcome everybody. So lovely that you can join me on my maiden adventure with technology here, live from Galway City. What can I say? It's a somber week to be doing a live poetry reading. We've lost one of our greatest poets, Evan Boland, who died suddenly this week. There's so much one could say about Evan Boland. She was such a pioneer in Irish poetry. She was a generous poet, a brilliant workshop leader. I had the privilege of meeting her finally after many years of enjoying her poetry 2 summers ago in Kilkenny at the Arts Festival, and we 8 of us were really lucky to do a masterclass with her, and I think we were all blown away by her rigorous attention to detail, her acuity, and her brilliance, really. I mean, she has left us such a rich legacy, and one thing I can say confidently at this very unsettling and uncertain time is that we have a storehouse of cultural and artistic riches in Ireland that we can draw solace and comfort from now at this time of challenge. And Evan Boland's poetry, if you're not already familiar with it, it's a good time to seek it out and to absorb its richness and enjoy its questioning, its philosophical inquiry, its playfulness, its verbal acuity, the way it's penetrating into the Irish tradition and our history so deeply and so fearlessly. There's so much I can say about her, but I know that tomorrow on Poetry Day, there'll be a series of readings dedicated to Evan Boland. And in fact, I'd like to dedicate this reading to her as well. So that's quite a somber note to start on. And I'd like to lighten the tone a little bit now with a bit of levity. Many of us, you know, there's a global pandemic on, and it's okay not to be super productive. In fact, I think we need to be really gentle on ourselves and kind to ourselves in the current climate. And I have a playful poem here that talks about settling back into the couch to enjoy telly instead of meeting deadlines. So this is called Tonight I Spurned My Lyric Muse. And it's also playing with the idea of the seriousness of art and the muse, etc. Tonight I spurned my lyric muse for the sake of sex and the city. An act few writers could excuse, but it satisfied entirely. I sat there, let them fade away, ideas and associations, novel rhyme formations, and could I care less? No, vapours dispersed. I sank down deeper and deeper in my non-metaphorical sofa. Have I broken some time-honoured code, the primacy of the word? Or should I just accept that now I'm up to date with the dating lives of 4 New Yorkers? Should I relish this departure or question the impulse for pleasures so temporal? Think of Flaubert, the true ascetic, grafting alone in his freezing attic. Are those the voices of Keats and Shelley, censuring my love of telly? On the contrary, they rejoice for me. I have broken the bondage of documentation, the implicit mechanism of literary narcissism. Tonight I was right for once to indulge, and maybe one day I'll redress lacunae. Samantha's demeanour will yield a steamy Sistina. So a little bit of levity there to start off with. And I'd like to continue with a poem about historical stalking, and Greek mythology is full of it. And I've always been curious about where the idea of the poet laureate comes from. And when I researched it and looked into the water nymph Daphne, who was pursued by the god Apollo, and she kept spurning his advances. And eventually she got so fed up of being persecuted by him that she called out for help, and her father Peneus turned her into the laurel tree. And that's where we get our bay leaves from the laurel tree, etc. And Apollo still took her branches and took her leaves for the laureate. So this is Daphne's reply. It's Daphne's riposte to Apollo. Apollo, you made me a laureate of sorts, sentenced for all time to be trophy wife, to crown the heads or deck the necks of your chosen jocks and dilettantes. Listen up, Lord of Delphi, so you think you can define my destiny. I'm no accessory to festoon the victor, delight your eye, heighten your appetite, garnish whatever is on your plate, or placate your mounting desire. I was the huntress, not the prey, freely scaling forest and glade under the freight of your gaze, until I cried out to my father, and Peneus heard my pleas, hid me in this bark, these reeds. You couldn't possess me, yet still you snatched my bloom, just as I found myself rooted. How could you read my swaying branches' shimmering foliage as consent to thieve my leaves? So I'm reading, most of the poems tonight are from my new collection, which is Conditional Perfect. And it was published last year by Dira Press, a wonderful small independent press in County Galway. And the cover image, the wonderful painting, it's called Woman Wearing a District, and it's by the brilliant painter Pat Jordan, who is also a fantastic novelist and poet. So thank you so much, Pat, if you're tuned in, for letting me use that gorgeous painting on the cover. She has such a sphinx-like quality. You don't know what she's thinking, and you wonder what's in her mind. So I'm going to continue now with a poem I wrote, and it was Poem of the Week in the Irish Times last December, and I didn't realise when I wrote it how prescient it would be. It's called Envoy in Chalk. I'm calling my son from the end of our estate, when my eye snags on green pastel words. He has chalked on the pavement, the world is great. This is just the line I need to read. My mother in hospital, my shoulder inflamed, our financial future uncertain, Earth eyeballing Armageddon. Yet how right his perception. He bolts up on his yellow scooter, 8-year-old fringe quiffed with gel, on the cusp of the age of cool. I'm going to read a poem now that I haven't read before to an audience, and it goes out, it was inspired by a brave woman in the House of Commons, a Scottish MP named Danielle Rowley. I'll just get the page here first. And she in June 2018, she stated in the House of Commons, "Perhaps you'll excuse my lateness, I'm on my period." And she proceeded to talk about the tax on sanitary towels and etc. Very important issues. And so I wrote this poem. I was inspired to write this poem, and it goes out to all my sisters out there, biological sisters and my sisters in general across the globe. And it's also inspired by stories that my friends have told me, my friends and family, about their own personal woes with menstruation and matters like that we don't tend to talk about. It's called Poem for the Female Unspoken. This poem goes out to generations who had to keep confidences about the curse, clots, blood stains, cotton wool bulk between their legs, menstruating in harsh climates with minimal comforts. This poem flies in the face of centuries of social mores, honours loose pelvic floors, the sanctity of feminine secrets, universal female fear of leaking crimson through smalls, seeping into jeans, onto crisp white linen. How many women through history have shared this worry when they slept on foreign sheets? This poem bears witness to small hidden woes endured in silence. That morning she inserted her first tampon in anticipation of a rough sea crossing, her acute unease swaying back and forth above a choppy ocean, her mortification about the 4th degree tear after the birth of the baby, the soreness and weak bladder she suffered ever since, secreting just enough urine as she coughs or sneezes to force her home from functions too soon. And those perimenopausal bleeds, a Red Sea deluge that borders on a hemorrhage, leaves her on the brink of going to A&E. Today, a fearless MP has announced to her peers in the House of Commons that she was late because she was on her period. Good on her. If men had menses, I venture they would be leaning over bars and fences, chatting about the relative merits of moon cups, pads, and Tampax. Now, I've actually misplaced my glasses, and so I'm very conscious of the light fading here, but on a positive note, I wrote a poem recently about anxiety around my fading visibility, my vision. And I think, it's probably about adapting to the COVID-19 situation as well. I think it's probably a way of coming to an acceptance of that and this surreal situation we find ourselves in. Thank you for the lovely comments coming in, folks. It's really, really lovely. So this is called Myhopia. It's a little wordplay on myopia, and it's about arriving at a place of acceptance. As someone who once had 100% vision, I'm finally adjusting to the blurring illusion of middle age. The loss of precision no longer triggers my internal panic button. It's taken some time to arrive at this stage. The shock of misreading paragraphs completely, sudden blindness at the page in front of me, the myopic perception I almost took for truth. Today I laughed at my own double take as I misread sorrow as marrow and joy as jolt, and thought there was a new Irish poetry army, then realised the specious serendipity and what it tells me about myself. And why shouldn't we make this standing army official, if for no other reason than to fulfil Kavanagh's prophecy? And I commandeered my marrow and jolt in a single poem, just like a slip of the tongue on the page. If writing's already a partial letting go into the unconscious, let's see what else I misread between now and the time I acquire my new glasses. So that was just to give myself a little nudge of confidence in case words start blurring for me here. I'm going to continue with the poem from this book here, Conditional Perfect. And I suppose at this time of uncertainty and challenge, we think about all of those who are marginalized. We think of those who are on the fringes of society, and we worry about how our migrants are being treated. Are they being protected enough? Are our Irish travellers being protected enough from the virus? I know we're hearing terrible stories about direct provision centres and from in Cork and various places. And so this poem, we think of them, I suppose I'm thinking of them as I read this poem. Now, I hadn't a clue how this poem was going to end up. And it came from rereading about the Mason-Dixon line. And so when I start, as a friend acutely observed, it moves from a place of innocence to experience. So this is called Where Have We Drawn Our Mason-Dixon Line? The first time I heard the Mason-Dixon line, I was getting set for a road trip to New Orleans. A middle-class Caucasian from Leitrim, what did I know of antebellum terrain riven with narratives of slavery and supremacy? I tried to parse my cool new currency. People bought me beer for being Irish, just because of their ancestry, because we didn't colonize anybody, or because I was white and passably pretty. Years later, I read the phrase again and realize most countries have figurative partitions, those soft, invisible borders we can so easily turn from, so we are not parallel with the latitude of favelas or the longitude of high-rise inner-city towers, or the fault lines of traveller halting sites, where a chip pan that catches a light can stealthily burn out 10 lives. That poem actually affects me when I read it. That's why I don't read it in public. What do I see now? So I actually write in Irish sometimes, and I'd like to read just one poem in Irish. It's called Mockasowl, and it's a play on the word Mockasowl, which is quite a beautiful word to unpack. It means counterpart, Mockasowl, and you can break it down nicely, and that's what this poem attempts to do. Mockasowl. Is tú ma wachasowl, moch ma hauliachta, mochela ma haultacha. A co-hashtali churan tú in a lí ar minchin, gur féidir ma ski a ligand, is by réiteach ar gach scéal, fuishiv o chuile imní. Cohíon mid charman crí ar scá a chéile, fui anál an duine eile. Is bláhíam in níjan dod lór is the dhéga, ceann scríba ma anima. So a love poem in Irish there. Well, I think a lot of us have been having crazy dreams during this pandemic. And I'm going to read a poem now that was inspired by one of those crazy dreams, not about the COVID-19 situation, but actually based on something else. This is called Galway Mold, and it's kind of a celebration of our city. It's well known for its volume of rainfall and for being a bit damp in the winters. So this is Galway Mold. We take the damp for granted here. Blinds draw back to reveal colonies of galaxies, tiny black holes in our new collective space. It's only condensation, next door concedes. The weather's too wintry to open the windows. My wooden bangle by the sill slips into a mildewed coat of green. For fun, I bought you mouldy cheese, and last night it took revenge on me, inducing a vivid dream of a white chandelier of mould that slowly lowered through our kitchen ceiling, a lichened lantern, till its lattices became milky spores, mouths that started to open and close. Then I awoke, vowing to spray our wall of condensation, diffuse for good my fascination with Galway mould. I'm just going to read another few poems, and I'd like to I know many of my family are tuned in this evening, and my grandmother was a huge influence on me. Eileen Lee was her name, and she was a Kerry woman, and she lived most of her life in Cork, County Cork. And this poem was published in my second collection, which was published by Ireland House in 2013. It's called In Between Angels and Animals. And I'm going to read a poem called In Memory of My Grandmother. Your words were windows on a Gaelic world, unofficial Shanachie of our family. Your similes and phrases were novel and spontaneous, about cows not finding their calves in this mess, the happiness of a cow and a cock of hay. You knew all the ballads of Thomas Davis, fused Gaelic words with English phrases, Owenshuk, Sagosha, Táhélan. You sang old Camalias while baking tarts, told stories of bringing your cart to the creamery, piglets to the mart, when a single girl in Brosna. You wrote to query De Valera, he praised your self-reliance. You spotted Granda waiting for confession, his piety and his uniform made an impression. He followed your brown eyes to England to ask for your hand. Gregory Peck noticed your raven hair when he waltzed you from the crowd in Kerry in 1956 while filming Moby Dick. You taught me the Holy Spirit prayer. Soul of my soul, I adore thee. Introduced me to Sister Faustina and the Divine Mercy. I bear witness to your transmission of faith, folklore, and tradition. May we hear your voice at the threshold again, bidding us, welcome, welcome, welcome. Gran used to always say, welcome, welcome, welcome. She wanted everyone to feel at ease and to feel at home when they entered her door. And I know that many people are thinking about their grandparents at this time. And so that poem, I hope, resonates with you as well and might bring some comfort. I think maybe just one or two poems more now. So I'm going to bring this to a close pretty soon, I think, with I'm just reading, so all hi Enda. You're not Maldi at all, Enda, don't worry. Maldi accommodation. Oh, there's some great comments coming in. In fact, if you want to ask me any questions at all, when I first got glasses in my 20s, my father remarked he'd always wanted a clever looking son. I love it. I love it. Plenty of chin stroking cleverality there. Oh, lovely comments coming in. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Music is very important to me. Some of you might know that I play the harp, and my three sisters, we all play the harp. And my beloved harp, I miss it an awful lot because it's actually in Uachtarard at the moment, being in the very in the safe hands of a wonderful harp repairer there. It had a little accident, and Natalie Serena is doing a wonderful job in nursing it back to care, to health. So I can't play it, unfortunately, this evening. But the third section of my book is all about music. And I'm going to read a poem now in the voice of Dennis Hempson. And so I've written a sequence of monologues in the voices of the harpers, the 10 harpers who gathered in Belfast in 1792 for the famous last gathering of harpers. And this was a watershed moment in our history. This was the moment when Edward Bunting, he was only 19, he was an organist in Belfast, he was commissioned to write down the music and preserve it for posterity. And this was the first time that our music was written down. And the 10 harpers who turned up, a call was put out in all the newspapers across the country, and 10 harpers turned up, and at least 6 of them were blind. Dennis Hempson was the oldest, he was 97, and he was the only one who played the harp in the traditional way with the crooked fingernails. And what inspired me to write these monologues was actually reading about Dennis and about his intricate emotions around passing on the music. He felt almost a kind of a resignation that the music that he used to play in the old harpers modes wouldn't be appreciated or understood in the modern world anymore, because the new Italian modes were coming in, and the chromaticism and all the rest, and the demand for orchestral music was coming in. And so he was sad. There were tears running down the man's cheeks. And that's what inspired me to write these monologues. I just had to try and unpack what was going through his head. So this is Dennis Hempson. They've forgotten the old music a cara, taken in with the new Italian modes. We played Glacena the ancient way, when those notes ignited penal times with the hope of the earthly world. I'd sooner have Eileen Aroon or the Cullen than sully those sounds with planksties of Carolyn. Give me the native airs our people played, from the Gultry of Oisin to the Soonthry of Bugbrain to the Gyanthry of Craftonay. This land trembled with willows and strings. These gnarled nails, rheumatic fingers, caught wires between flesh and claw. Bridget O'Kane showed me how to clip notes in staccato, then return to a flow. They say Pythagoras was the only mortal who could hear the music of the spheres. Am I the last man left alive with the Shanachol ringing in his ears? The dear, dear, sweet old Irish tunes. I will not profane the memory of these strains by yielding them to this age of betrayal. So that's my take on Dennis Hempson. And I think actually I'm going to finish with another Galway poem. And we live in a very vibrant city here, and my hope is that when things return to normality and we're back out on the streets again together, that we'll be able to hear the vibrant music of the streets and the buskers, and when we're not under lockdown, that maybe the new busking bylaws will be reappraised and perhaps relaxed, because the vibrant buzz on the streets of Galway is an eternal part of the magic of Galway. And this poem tries to capture something of that essence. It's called Galway Flux. Saturday afternoon. Ozone and olive oil marinate an Atlantic breeze. Brine and garlic meander from the market. Salmon skirt waders crossing the weir. We spy a Galway hooker dawdling at the pier. Students are buck-fastened by sluggish canals. Buskers belt out ballads. I'll tell me ma when I go home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. Revellers swig cider in Wellingtons, bounding to a gig at Leisureland. On Quay Street, a melodeon plays Drowsy Maggie. A diva renders You Fill Up My Senses. Vibrato mingles with the timbre of tourists babbling outside restaurants. Saturday evening. Teeming mist and ocean spray, our Venus rising from the waves, alighting from an oyster shell, born on the ebb of Atlantic swell, entering the bay from some mellow canal, whose only competition, the regal heron, downriver where Anach Cuan followed the drowning of Menlo. Galvia outruns Annalivia in sluicing runneling pinnacle. Stone Age halberds exhumed in the silt, remains of a grandiose railway bridge, and in this infinite maritime, the salt-aired flux of Galway. Sin é Miscéal a chuirde, and I'll leave it at that. And thank you so much for joining me on this reading. I'll just have a look at some of your comments here. Oh, thank you so much, Paula, for the lovely comment. I'm glad you liked the poem for my gran. Michael is glad he doesn't get the menses. Fair play to you, Michael. You wouldn't want the curse, I'll tell you. The only thing I don't enjoy about being a woman, everything else is fantastic. Thank you, Con. Thanks for sharing the beautiful poem. Thank you so much. Oh, that's lovely to read. Thanks, Linda. Very kind. Thanks for joining me, folks. And stay well and look after each other. And as Philip Larkin said, we must be kind while we still have time. Isn't that true? I hope I have that line right. It's always permeating my head. We must be kind while there is still time. So look after each other, folks, and stay well and stay healthy. And hopefully this will all be over before too long. And we're doing great. We're doing great. We just have to keep it up. Bye. Slán go fóill.